Hey YouTube, it's your girl, Dr. J, the Midlife Writer, and today I am going to talk about a topic that I don't think gets talked about enough, and it is an ugly truth that people sometimes have to deal with if they plan on moving overseas, immigrating overseas, particularly from the United States. And that ugly truth is that the socioeconomic status that you live in the United States is more than likely going to carry over into your new location. A lot of times I'm on YouTube or Instagram or any other of these social media platforms, and I see people showing their lives that they're living in other countries, and there's this perception by people that, oh, it doesn't matter how much money I had in the United States, I'm going to be able to live my best economic life if I just move someplace else. And that is a perception that is not accurate. And I think we need to talk about that. I think we need to have a conversation about that. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. I'm just giving you the truth. I'm giving you the real. So why is it that your socioeconomic status that you have in the United States is probably going to be the socioeconomic status that you live if you immigrate overseas? Well, number one is that pillars of socioeconomic status that we have in the United States are similar to the pillars of socioeconomic status that are in the places that you'd be most likely to immigrate to. So there are rich people, middle class, including upper middle class, the middle class, the lower middle class, which are people who are kind of on the cusp of falling into the working class socioeconomic status. These are not people labels. These are monetary labels, okay? This is not a reflection of people, value, or worth. This is just dollar data, okay? So there's working class. There are people who are in poverty, okay? So that is the ladder that exists in Mexico, in Panama, in Portugal, in South Korea, in Taiwan, Thailand, France, Germany, UK, everywhere. Okay, so this idea that rich in the United States is different than rich in Mexico, you have to get that out of your head. There was one point in time, my husband and I were just talking about this, there was one point in time where the richest person in the world was in Mexico, a Mexican citizen. So this idea that rich in the US is a different kind of rich than rich other places, that's not the case. Okay. If you're not rich in the US, you're not going to be considered rich anyplace else. Okay. Middle class in the United States tends to be folks where they are able to own a home or rent a home where every child has their own bedroom, and the head of the household and spouse have a master suite. That's the experience. Maybe they have an ensuite bath. That is a middle class life in other places. So if you're middle class in the United States, chances are you're going to be middle class when you immigrate to someplace else. And so your money in exchange is not going to be, okay, I am leaving the United States and I am middle class, so I am going to go to Panama or go to Mexico or go to Chile or go to Taiwan or Thailand, and I am going to be in the upper elite and I'm going to be rich. You have to get that out of your head. And a lot of videos that I watch where people have left the United States and then they come back, one of the common factors is it was money, right? And it's because there is a perception that's given by some people who have immigrated to other places that you can go live your best economic life someplace else because the money is totally different than the money in US dollars. First of all, currency fluctuates. So even for me right now in South Korea, the US dollar is not as strong against the South Korean won today as it was when I moved here. And so it's not a problem for us because we knew that we came in understanding that there's a fluctuation that happens with currency. And so if the US dollar is strong, that means I can buy more stuff. But if the US dollar is not as strong, I can buy less stuff. If that's not a conversation that's been had from people that you're following, then you need to be aware of that. Like, okay, what your dollar can get you changes by the day. And sometimes those changes can be severe and sometimes those changes are cyclical. So that the dollar might not be as strong against that currency for months or years at a time. And so you need to know that. The other thing is one of the things that draws us as US citizens to live other places is the idea of having a living wage. I know that I have been hearing US citizens and where I am complain quite a bit about the cost of a taxi ride. You know, they're like, I can't believe it's so expensive to take a taxi. Like, I can't believe they're charging me this much money. Well, you had to pay that much money because you took a taxi for 1 mile. Generally, people in this country will walk a mile. The idea that you're going to take a taxi for a 1 mile for 1 mile down the road, why? You just walk that. And so if you don't want to if you don't want to walk, you want to take a taxi, okay, you acting like a rich person. And so it's not that they're trying to gouge you, it's that taxi drivers make a living wage. And so why you thought it was only supposed to cost you a quarter to go to Mount is that you thought that that taxi driver did not deserve a living wage. But just like if you were in the United States and you go, okay, I'm going to take this 1 mile, it's going to cost me some money. It's going to cost you some money to do that in any place that you're at. And so, yeah, I might take a taxi if I'm in the middle of a monsoon downpour because I don't want to walk in extreme pouring rain for 1 mile. But if it's not pouring down rain and I'm a mile away, I'm walking because that's what folks who aren't rich are doing. So you have to understand that that's the reality that you're going to be going into. And so if you could afford to have somebody clean your house once a month in the United States, you're probably going to be able to afford to have somebody clean your home once a month other places that you go to. But the idea that you could not afford ever to have anybody clean your house ever, and you're going to take that same money and you're going to go someplace else and they're going to clean your house every 3 days because you have a US dollars, you have to get that out of your head. Because the only way that will work is if those individuals were not being paid a living wage. And so can you find people who are desperate to work that they would work for an exploitative wage? Yes, but that makes you an exploiter and exploiting people's poverty. And so if that's the type of person you want to be, you can find people who have extreme need and will work for anything. But is that who you want to be? But most people who are above board and working legally in the country that you're immigrating to are going to be getting paid a living wage. And you need to be ready to pay that living wage price. And so why is it that sometimes you see people and they seem like they were like you, they were in your same class, and they moved to another country and they're just living it up? Okay, let's look at that. There's a couple of reasons why you see that. Let's say if I travel and I'm going to be somewhere for a month and I have $10,000 that I saved up to live in this place for 1 month. I can tell you almost 90% of the places that you will encounter in the United States, if you were going to live there for just 1 month and you had $10,000 US to spend, you could live it up. You could look like you were a rock star because $10,000 is a lot to have for 1 month that you can spend frivolously. However, the idea that you're going to live someplace for the rest of your life and you took $10,000, like that's not realistic. And so that's the thing. How long did they plan on being there? And what was the budget that they had? Because they might have had a really big budget compared to the amount of time that they planned on being in that space. Sometimes people think, oh, I have $100,000, say $100,000 US. I am going to be able to live like I'm Beyonce in Mexico. No, you're not. No, you're not. Because a house is going to cost $100,000. And so, the house that you think you're going to have in your head that you want in Mexico is going to cost you $100,000. And so if all you have is $100,000, how are you going to eat? How are you going to get around transportation wise? How are you going to pay for these experiences that you plan on having? So even $100,000 is not going to be set you up to live a higher lifestyle if that's all you have and you plan on being there for more than a year. If you have $100,000 to spend and you only plan on being in Mexico for a year or 2 years, then you can probably live very well for that money. But if you plan on taking $100,000 and living there for the rest of your life and not making any more money, you are not going to elevate your lifestyle. You are going to be living the same life. And so I just want to make sure that we have this conversation and we can be honest and real with each other, because it really breaks my heart when I'm watching these videos of people that had to come back to the US because they ran out of money, or they were like, hey, I wasn't making it. And, I wasn't living the life that I wanted to live. And that's oftentimes because they saw people living a lifestyle that might have been an upper middle class lifestyle, right? Because those people had upper middle class money and they probably left the US with upper middle class money. And then you go in and you're middle class too, but socioeconomically, you're more at the bottom of that middle class. And so you thought that you were going to live the equivalent of their lifestyle when your lifestyle, it wasn't an equivalent one for one. And so it's just a matter of make sure you understand. Now, there is nothing wrong with being middle class anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. And I would say, as a US citizen, there are a lot of places I would rather be middle class than the United States. Why? Because when you are middle class in the United States, you are in constant fear of falling out of the middle class, and you're not falling up, you're falling down. You know that one medical emergency will topple you right out of the middle class. You know that paying for college is extremely tough if you are in the middle class. You know things like going on vacation can seem out of reach in the middle class. Traveling extensively can be out of reach in the middle class if you are in the United States. However, if you are the middle class here in South Korea or in Portugal or in Spain or in France or in a lot of the other places that you might want to immigrate to, if you're going to be middle class, or whether that's Ghana, South Africa, a lot of places, if you're middle class, if you have a medical emergency, you don't have to fear, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose my house, I'm going to lose my car, I'm not going to be able to eat for the rest of my life because I have a medical emergency. That's not going to happen in most of the places that you would want to immigrate to. And so that's why being middle class in other countries is you don't have the constant fear that one wrong move and you are done for. One broke leg, or one bout with cancer, or one diagnosis of diabetes, and all of a sudden you don't know where your next meal is coming from. That fear tends to not be there when you are not in the United States. The cost of college in most places, the cost of college is much more reasonable compared to the United States. The only places where there might be a little bit equivalent of the cost is Canada. I've seen the prices of college in Canada, and they seem to be almost equivalent to the price of colleges, public universities in the United States. But when you look at the cost of college in a lot of other countries, the cost of college is not nearly as overwhelming as the cost of college in the US. And so, yeah, if you have kids and they're about to go to college and they're able to go to college in these other countries, then being middle class is much less stressful because you're not worried about, is my child going to be saddled with a bunch of debt, or am I going to be saddled with extreme debt because I'm trying to pay for their college? So that pressure is off. Traveling in the United States from one city to the next can be very expensive. Where I am in South Korea, I can travel to whole other countries for $300 US. I'm not getting on a plane in the United States and going any other country for $300. I can't get to a lot of states in the United States for $300. And so I can travel as a middle class person more places if I'm in the middle class in South Korea, or if I'm sitting in the UK, or if I'm sitting in France, I can travel to Belgium, I can travel to Germany, I can travel to, Spain and Italy and all these other places because it's reasonably priced for me to get to those places while I am living my middle class life in France. As opposed to if I am in the United States and I'm middle class, my dreams of just taking a whole family international, they're not going to be realized. But I'm still going to be middle class. And so that is something I think that people really need to be aware of. If you are in a 5-bedroom house with an elevator and a chef in the United States, you are probably going to be able to live in a 5-bedroom house with an elevator and a chef in other countries. If you live in a 3-bedroom townhouse in the United States, the chances of you getting a 5-bedroom home with an elevator and a live-in chef in another country is probably not realistic. For vacation, very realistic. For a week, you can do it. For a month, some places. For a year, maybe, depending on how you play your cards. For the rest of your life, it's not going to happen. And I think we need to be honest about that. Can you have an amazing life? Can you do a lot more in some places where parks may be free and museums may be free and they have festivals that are free for you to attend? So you have more opportunities to have just relaxing times and fun and all these other sort of wonderful things. Absolutely, they are there. They can happen for you. You can have a more relaxed experience. But the idea that your US money that you have, you individually, not Beyonce, you, that you have is going to make you rich someplace else is just not a realistic expectation. And we need to tame that. One thing I think that we have to make sure that we are paying attention to when we watch people's experiences in other countries is how, what are the things that are a part of their experience that are different from me, that will lead me to have a different lived experience. Okay. And so take that into consideration. When they left, were they upper middle class? Were they rich when they left? Okay, if I'm looking at it through that lens, I need to know that and look through that lens as opposed to thinking that I am going to have that same lived experience if I go to the same place that they are. Are they still bringing in money? Okay, that's why I told y'all, that's why we Wi-Fi, that's why we work internationally, because we wanted a more robust lived experience even internationally. And so because of what we bring in, we can live the equivalent life that we were living in the US. But if we came here and we had retired, we would not be living, one way, we'd be living a different way. We'd still be happy, but there were some things that we had to think about. I told you guys, our kids are more than likely, all three of them, going to college in the U.S. So we have to take that into consideration and what we were going to be doing. Don't think that you're going to be able to, move to some countries and, just with your regular money that was middle class for you, you're going to be able to, I can send my kids to college, and I can do this, and I can do that. And like, if it was going to be a struggle for you to be able to send your kids to college in the U.S. and you're still going to be making equivalent money, then it's probably still going to be tough for you to send your kids to college in the U.S. But if you are going to send your kids to college in a different country that has significantly lower college costs, then you're going to be able to do that without the pressure. And so, is it worth it to move internationally as a part of the middle class, as part of the working class? Yes, I would say. Because, like I said, you don't have to fear that you're never going to eat again because you have a medical emergency. And you don't have to fear that your kids are never going to be able to get a higher education because it's not affordable. Or you are not going to have to just be struggle and hustle culture and all that kind of stuff because they believe in a living wage. And you're going to be, and that's for you too if you're working there. Or there's more things that are free and are open to the public. And so you will be able to do more things because there's less things that cost a lot of money. But the idea that you're never going to have to cook again because food is going to be so cheap, you just don't have to cook. If you can't eat out every day for every meal in the U.S., you're not going to be able to eat out every day for every meal when you move abroad. If you can't, just, have somebody do everything for you. If you can't get your hair done every 3 days in the United States, you're not going to be able to get your hair done every 3 days wherever you move to. Just make sure that you're being realistic about the experiences that you have. Will life be sweet? Absolutely. Will life be good? Absolutely. Will you be able to live without as much stress, without as much anxiety, without as much fear of being able to afford your next meal? Absolutely. But the idea that you're going to jump socioeconomic statuses with the same money that you left with, I think that is what we have to taper. And that we have to, ensure that we're not looking at people's lifestyles that brought in significantly more than we brought in and think that we're going to have that equivalent life just because we're in a different country. Okay. So that's not the case. And I want to make sure that you know that going in so that you're not disappointed, because there's nothing wrong with being working class. There's nothing wrong with being poor. There's nothing that's not a reflection of who you are as a person. That's not a reflection of your humanity. You are an amazing individual. You should be treated humanely. And it's not to say like, oh, I'm going to have to go and live amongst working class people, so I'm not going to have a good time. How dare you? No, that's not it at all. And living in a working class community, wherever you are, that doesn't mean that, oh, it's going to be violent, oh, there's going to be crime, oh, there's going to be terrible people. Not at all. Not at all. Don't go anywhere with that attitude. I just want you to know that the money equivalent is probably going to be your working class in the United States. That's going to be your line. You're middle class and you're taking the same money. Now, if you are working class and you land a job that's middle class in another country, middle class equivalent, remember, money, not value, not people, money. We're only talking dollars or won or pesos, okay? So if you land a job where the socioeconomic space is higher, then you're going to live a higher space. But if you are pretty much going to be equivalent, then you are going to live an equivalent life. I'm not talking about vacation. I'm not talking about in and out. I'm not talking about temporary. I'm talking about live. And so I just wanted us to be able to have this conversation, talk it out, be real. I hope this helps. If you liked what we talked about, please feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. But till next time, this is Dr. J, the Midlife Writer. Bye-bye.